Hello and welcome to the Novell Access Governance Suite Proficiency Series Sales Training. My name is Justin Taylor, Novell's Identity and Security Guru, and I'll be your host for this training. To begin with, let's first take a look at where Access Governance Suite fits in the market. The market that this is referred to, or that it plays in, is referred to as the Identity and Access Governance market. Now, this particular market is made up of the products and services that are catering to the needs of companies to manage the perpetual long-term life cycle of controlling access to company assets, whether those assets are physical assets, human assets, or intellectual property and data. Now, obviously, there's some kind of driver behind it. And when we look at the drivers here, we're going to look at the perspective of what are the things that are happening within a business that could be referred to more as a business pain point. Again, pain usually is tied to a particular individual, but from this perspective, we're looking at what are the overall pains that companies would say that they're facing. The very first one is rising security threats. And this is referring to the fact that there are so many threats, both internal and external. People trying to get access to things that they shouldn't have access to. Because of those threats, the number 2 item pops up, the increased scrutiny. So now companies, as well as internal investigators and risk managers, are looking to see what's going on within their business and want to have better control over that as well. Third are the increased costs because of this. So as we start digging deeper and deeper and deeper into the process, that costs us more money, or costs companies more money, to go through and manage that. Then once they find something, guess what? Even more increased costs, because now they've got to go and implement these different policies, wherever that policy may have come from. Finally, decreased productivity. This is a big thing, and we're going to talk about that throughout this presentation as well, is about the fact that security can be a productivity drain on individuals if it's not done properly. Now that we have a better understanding about what's really driving from a business perspective the identity and access governance marketplace, let's take a look at the trends that we're seeing in the industry. Now, these trends are identified by not only what Novell is doing, but what our competitors have done, what customers are telling us, and what analysts and press and others are giving us as well. The first thing that we see, especially from Novell's perspective, is automation. Automation is a key aspect of governing or managing access within a company. Why? Well, because it takes the human error out of the equation. That's typically where most of the vulnerabilities come from, so that things are applied consistently through automation. This also then has that wonderful effect of taking away a lot of the cost in it as well. So reduction of risk and cost through automation. The second aspect is the enterprise-wide visibility that customers are demanding. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, in order to make a good decision, what have you always been told? Have all the information. So in order to do that, we have to have a way to show exactly what's really happening throughout the entire organization. And that leads into the third point, that business and IT need to have that visibility and collaborate together on the problem. It's not enough for IT to simply go and implement these policies. It's got to be driven by the business. Now, this also comes down to number 4, attestation and certification. It's one thing for the business and IT to collaborate. It's quite another for IT to just be the person that has to go out and implement. We need the business to state and to attest and certify that what has been given out is still relevant. Remember, governance for access is a life cycle. It's a perpetual process that needs to take place. And so this process needs to be put in there to attest and certify numerous times, actually forever, throughout the life cycle of your company or of a customer company. And the very last thing that we're seeing is the addition not only of tools that help to automate and to provide that visibility and to test and certify, but also now the addition of proactive monitoring to be added into a solution to make sure that while I trust the system, I can also verify that what's really happening on the environment is what was supposed to happen in the environment is actually happening, and that I can proactively monitor and remediate any problems that might occur before the auditor shows up. As you look closer at the marketplace and see what the drivers and the trends are, you're probably already beginning to think that you have customers within your sales database that you could begin to offer this or begin to understand whether or not this would be a solution for them. To get a little deeper into this, we're now going to discuss what is an ideal customer. We're going to look at it from two different perspectives. What is a good opportunity, one that you should pursue, and what is a poor opportunity? Now, before we get into this content, we just want to be very clear, is that it's really up to you to make that decision about what is good and what is not. There's going to be a lot of factors in here that we're not going to be able to identify, and so we need you to be able to identify those things. However, we're going to give you some general good criteria to look at, some specific things to look at for the Access Governance Suite product, and then some questions to ask yourself. Let's first of all start off with a good opportunity. And here's what we're defining as a good opportunity. This is a customer that is actively looking for a solution to an admitted pain. They see they have one of these pains that we discussed earlier, and that they have a strong alignment with a Novell or partner capability, such as the Access Governance Suite. In general, you want to look for a couple characteristics, though. One, again, have they admitted the pain? Second, are they actively looking for a solution today? Third, are they early in the process? If they're early in the process, then you can start to craft or work with them to understand what a vision could be to answer their access governance needs. Fourth, are they willing to provide metrics? And really, you get down to more specifics here or less specifics and say, are they cooperating with you? Are they a cooperative customer? And then fifth, is there a Novell success story at a similar company and industry? At some point, you're probably going to get asked to provide some kind of reference, so it's good maybe to have that information up front. Again, any one of these on themselves is not an indication of a good opportunity. But all of them together, if we can find a customer that has all of these from a general perspective, it's probably a good opportunity to begin looking at. Those are the general set of criteria that you should look for any opportunity. Let's now look at the specific criteria that we're going to look for an Access Governance Suite customer. We're going to look first to see if they're regulated. Are they liable to some kind of regulations out there? And guess what? The more regulations they have, the easier it is to create a value proposition for this product. Second, we're going to look at the scale. We're looking at scale not just on the size of the customer, but the scale, the number of changes they have to make. How many people are they hiring and firing and bringing in the organization? How many different audits do they have to do? How many regulations? It's more than just the size of the company. We're also going to look at their costs. Now, most companies are going to say that they have high or increasing governance and compliance costs. And again, I separate those, high or increasing. Some customers may say they're high and they're continuing to increase. And some customers are going to say, well, they're not high yet, but I can see as a foreshadow of the future that they are going to be increasing. And the last one here is some kind of recent security issue. That doesn't mean that they had to have been written up or something of that nature. You may be looking for customers in a particular industry. Take a look, for example, at the USA Today or the Financial Times or some type of paper, either online or in print, and find a security issue. When you see those, go and find out not only who that customer is, but who their competitors are. That will be a key driver. This is something that's going to drive them because remember, that's a business driver that we discussed earlier, is those security threats and the risks involved. With the criteria that we've stated before, both the general and the specifics, here's a couple questions that you could ask yourself to identify whether this is a good opportunity. First, does the customer see the value of an automated approach to access governance? Ask the question, are you looking at an automated approach to reduce what? Well, cost, risk, and things of that nature. Second, does the customer see the value of integrating business leaders and IT into the governance process? Simple question to ask. Have you ever thought about a way to integrate both your business and IT? Is that a strategic initiative that you have, or have you ever even thought about that? Third, does the company see the value of using roles in their business? Now let's be very clear here. Access Governance Suite can work with roles or without roles. It doesn't necessarily always have to have it, and that's one thing we really want to make sure you understand. But roles are a common tool and really lends to some of the strengths of what the Access Governance Suite, lends to its customer. So please be sure to think about these three things before you make a decision. You may look at some of the generals and specifics and say, well, they're not all the way there, but maybe if you can answer these three in a positive light, then maybe they are worth pursuing. Again, you have to make that decision along with your sales management. Sometimes, though, after we've looked at an opportunity and decided, well, we're not sure if it's a good opportunity, we have to then start to think whether or not this is really an opportunity we want to pursue. Is it a poor opportunity? Now, the definition we're going to use for a poor opportunity is a customer that is, one, not actively looking for a solution or is far down their evaluation process, and two, is bringing you in just for column fodder, meaning I had to get 3 bids, so you're the third, Novell. Let's take a look at some criteria that we can judge this, again, from a general perspective. One, if they have latent or unadmitted pain and they don't really see that they have this problem, there may be better things for you to spend your time on. Second, goes right back to number 1, they're not looking. If they haven't admitted the pain, they're not going to be looking. But sometimes it's a matter of they know they have a pain, but they're not really looking for a way to solve it right now. Maybe they have other more pressing items. And that, again, is where asking questions and finding that out is going to be important because we may have some other solution for them. The third aspect is considerable ways into buying process. So are they down the path so far that another vendor, for example, has already crafted their vision? And we'll talk about some more specifics there. But the farther they are into the buying process, the less likely you are to win. Fourth, they can't or won't provide metrics. Or bottom line, they're not cooperating with you. And lastly, no similar success. So if you look at the company and you say, I can't find any success stories from Novell that we've ever done anything like this for the company, the size or location or the type of solution that we're trying to deal with, well, it may be an indicator that it may be a little early or they may be cutting edge to the point that it's not quite ready for them yet. Now, as with a good opportunity evaluation, we also have to look at specific things about a poor opportunity to make a decision as well. First, again, if they're unregulated, meaning they don't really have any outside influence on them, maybe it's not such a big deal. Why? Well, because the risk isn't there for them to move forward. But again, there may be risk from other aspects such as public opinion, customer performance, things of that nature, that they could be still a good opportunity. Second is the smaller scale. If they don't have a lot of changes going on, not a lot of individuals, then there's probably not going to be a way to justify the value in the product. And third, if they honestly believe and you can see that they have manageable costs and they have a solution in place that's managing it, even though the solution from Novell would probably provide them a lot of value, it's probably not a good idea to pursue the deal. Walk away from it and go find someone that does have it, or investigate to see what pains they have that we can provide real value for them. Here are some questions then that you can ask yourself to help you decide whether this is a poor opportunity or a good opportunity. First, is the RFP already created? If they've already got the RFP done, it means that you're probably too late or you're very late into the process. Now again, does that mean you don't go after it? No, you have to look at the other criteria. But remember, if an RFP has been crafted, that means that somebody else, going to number 2, you have to answer this question. Is the customer already leaning toward a competitor's vision? Now, you can find that out both by asking a question, who they've talked to, how they think about the problem, and what their vision is, as well as looking at the RFP. These will be good indicators about who or what they're sliding towards, or leaning towards, I should say. Third, can I re-engineer the customer's vision to match Novell's? So let's say you're looking at it, they have the RFP, and they've already, you can kind of see leaning towards a particular competitor. You need to ask yourself honestly, can I re-engineer that customer's vision to match Novell's vision of access governance? And lastly, will there be enough return for the customer to warrant the investment? This is why cooperation and metrics and asking questions is so key to the sales process for this. We don't want to go in and start talking about price right off the bat. We want to ask them the questions to find out what they're thinking, what their vision is, and what their current situation is so that we can justify it through a real value proposition based upon the real value and cost that they're seeing today and what we see them having in the future with our solution. Again, I just want to be very clear on all of these slides around good and bad or poor customers. You need to talk this over not only with yourself, but with your sales management and make a decision not based upon any one piece of criteria, but looking at all of them. You've learned about the market. You learned about the criteria for a good or poor customer. What about finding out who it is that you're supposed to talk to or could talk to within an organization about access governance needs? There's many different people that obviously have an issue here or that have pains related to this. We're going to take a look at a few of them in this particular training. We'll stress again, though, you need to find the right person in the organization. And the pains and topics that we're going to discuss may not be the specifics for that particular customer. But overall, these are the general pains and topics that, and concerns, I should say, that these type of individuals have. So we're going to take a look at a few. Number one, the COO, Chief Operating Officer. We're going to take a look at the CISO or CSO, depending upon the organization, the CIO, and a business executive. So you're going to see a mix here, not only of technology and security experts, but also of business leaders. Remember, the purpose of Access Governance Suite isn't just to provide yet another IT tool to manage roles and access. This is about bringing business and IT together in order to provide a real access governance solution that has long-term value to the customer, as well as reducing their risk and their costs. Let's take a look now at the first one. The Chief Operating Officer obviously is a very important person. Heck, he has chief in front of his title. Really, what is this person responsible for? Well, they're responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the company with responsibilities for the people, the processes, and the performance at an enterprise-wide level across the organization. Let's take a look at what they're measured on. And the reason we're going to do that first is that we want to understand what is it that they're being paid upon. A dear friend of mine within Novell once told me something that I've always remembered, and that is that people do what they're paid to do. So whatever they're being rewarded on or measured on are the things that they're going to be the most concerned with. And so their big measurements are going to be things such as operating margins, profitability, things of that nature on a company-wide scale. Second, they're going to be looking at their responsiveness. Remember, they're in charge of operations. COOs, the boards, things of that nature are probably the individuals with the vision about where they're trying to guide the company. They're going to evaluate the operating officer more on his or her ability to respond to the changes that they are setting for the vision, as well as the competitive changes that they're seeing in the marketplace. And third, while they may not necessarily be the chief vision type of person, they are looked at as being proactive. What are they doing long term to increase the operating margins and profitability there for the company, as well as to provide infrastructure and things of that nature to be responsive to the changes that they see coming forward. Now that we understand the measurements or what they're evaluated on, let's take a look at the pains associated with them. For example, endless security fire drills. What do we mean by that? Well, in most organizations who don't have some kind of automated approach or some integrated approach to managing access, they're always going to have these drills. Oh, we made some change and all of a sudden now 13% of our staff can't get access to some service. Again, does that tie into their life and their measurements? Yes, it's going to deal with things such as productivity, therefore their operating margins. It's going to look negative on this individual from a proactive nature, and that they're now going to have to respond to it. But again, it doesn't look to be very proactive. Now, these fire drills can come from things such as new or changing regulations, outside threats, the outdated or bad access policies. Again, why this is so important to look for something that has a life cycle management capability. Managing access isn't a caveman approach of, ugh, me part of this group. We don't do that anymore. Now we have to make intelligent decisions, but constantly be checking to make sure that those decisions are still right. And lastly, looking at improperly implemented policies. That would include both policies that aren't accurately being implemented, why certification and attestation are so important, but also ones that just weren't implemented to begin with because somebody forgot to do it, that human error, therefore why automation is so important. The second one is the decreasing or stagnant market share. Now, does that have anything to do with access governance? Well, in reality, it does, from a certain perspective. These COOs may see that their competitors are gaining competitive advantages, both from a productivity standpoint, profitability standpoint, whatever the case might be. Maybe because they're able to enter new markets. Maybe it's because they're able to respond to changes quicker. So they're going to have new competitors with lower costs. They're going to have existing competitors that are beginning to do what? Automate. The benefit to them, well, now all of a sudden they're starting to see the reduced cost, their ability to adapt to new situations quicker. They're able to have that enterprise-wide view. And all of a sudden now, Company X that he's the COO for, it may be an issue that he needs to find a way to do that. So can we help them? Certainly can with Access Governance Suite. Third aspect is the decreasing margins. Again, kind of goes back up to the other ones earlier, but that higher and increasing governance and compliance costs. Asking questions about that. What are their real costs for access governance and compliance? They're going to find that most of the time, especially for larger companies, those costs are always increasing. And here's the thing to think about too when we look at scale, is that the larger the company is, That means probably they're in multiple geographies. And because they're in multiple geographies, they're what? Well, they're going to be subjected to different types of regulations. And that's why Access Governance Suite is so great for them, because it allows them to take into account all of these and allow for different sets of policies to be integrated into one larger set. Let's now take a look at a second role within an organization. This is the line of business executive, and they may be called many things: vice president of X, Y, or Z, a department head, a geography president, whatever the case might be. The bottom line is that these individuals run a piece of the company's revenue-generating operations. So this is where the money is coming in. These aren't the back-end people necessarily that are just running manufacturing, even though they could be. We want to look a lot at the outside individuals, the people who actually are bringing in the revenue. They're responsible for not only overseeing the processes and people, but also the productivity of their slice of the company, whatever it might be. And just with the COO, they have certain measurements. They're going to be measured on the operating margin or profitability of their particular piece of the company. They're going to be looked also at responsiveness. How are they making changes and being able to adapt to the organization or to changing environments? And that's going to include being proactive as well, but it's also going to deal with the productivity of their business. That's one thing that they're really going to look at because, again, they're closer to their individuals, to their constituents, the people they manage, so they're really going to see what the productivity is for their organization. These measurements obviously come with their day-to-day pain. And here's some of the pain points that they might have. One, decreased worker productivity. Now, what does that have to do with access governance? Well, if you're sitting around waiting for things to change, if you're waiting for your employees to get put into the system and given the proper access because, let's say, they don't have access to something, that's a drain on productivity. So that's the change time. Second, they can't access resources. That's a big issue. And again, it's affected by the change time. And lastly, bad information. So companies that are trying to get access to the latest information, maybe they have access to something, but maybe that system is outdated and they were supposed to be using something else. Well, Access Governance Suite can help them to deal with those types of issues, again, through that automation and the integration of business and IT working together. So that as IT makes changes, the business knows and they can map those relationships together. Second, they can't respond to the change in the marketplace. Now, it could be based upon those things above, the change time, resource access, bad information, or it could be because they feel that they've lost control of security or for security and risk purposes. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, a lot of times you're going to find these executives very frustrated with the fact that they have to rely upon IT to do things. They can't make those changes themselves, especially as you find organizations that maybe have been acquired and move into a new culture and they feel a little left out of the loop because of the fact that they, again, have been taken over by someone else and now they have to work within these new guidelines. So we need a way to include them, and businesses and executives want to feel that control. And lastly, again, they're decreasing margins. It'll come right back up to those ones from above. Now, again, you're going to have an interview with them and ask them the questions to see whether or not these are really their pains or really what their pains are from day to day. The previous two that we looked at were really business leaders, individuals who use technology and are dependent upon it, but do not manage the day-to-day operations of it. Let's now take a look at two individuals who are part of the IT infrastructure or the IT departments within an organization and how they fit into this picture with access governance. So first, the Chief Information Officer. As you probably already know, they are responsible for overseeing the company's technical resources and capabilities, but they look at it from a slightly different perspective than, let's say, a director or a manager within the organization. They're looking at it always with an emphasis on providing business value. Company has a problem, they're looking for a way to solve it, whether it's regulatory or efficiency, productivity. They need to find a way to answer that problem using either the resources they have or going out and looking for a solution to address it. Now, typically, these are one of the key players. He or she is a key player in the compliance and governance aspect of the business. Why? Well, they're the ones that have to put in the infrastructure and manage the services that are going to be there for monitoring and reporting and for enforcing the access policies inside of the IT environment. Let's take a look at how they're measured. They're going to be measured on things like return on investment. You're going out, you're making this return or making this purchase. What's the return that the company is going to get? This is why value propositions are so key to the sales process here. In order to get that, guess what? You've got to know exactly what they're spending today in order to show value for the future. Second, the total cost of ownership. Now, this might come down to the fact that they go out and buy a particular solution. Now they need to see how much it's really costing to operate. Even though they may be getting a return, is there a cheaper way or a more efficient way for them to manage it? Third, the adherence to service level agreements, or SLAs. As we talked about with the business leaders, one of the things that they are worried about or concerned with is operating margins, being proactive, responsive, and productivity. Service level agreements are their way of enforcing policy onto the IT department to say this is how you are supposed to operate, how fast you're supposed to operate, what we're going to give you as far as wiggle room within them. And so those service level agreements are very important because that's how he or she is going to be measured. And lastly, consistency to policy enforcement. So if there is a policy that's supposed to be implemented access-wise or other, they need to ensure, or they're going to be measured on their ability and consistency in enforcing those policies. Just as with the business leaders, these measurements lead to pain points for them. Let's take a look at the CIOs. First, increased change, decreased resources. Very few individuals' IT budgets are going up in any significant way. Therefore, they're being asked to do more with less. Second, the lack of clarity or visibility into the business. They're asked to make decisions or to implement policies, but maybe they don't quite understand what's really going on in the business. They're told one thing, but yet it wasn't quite what the business has going on in real life. And so that clarity and visibility isn't always there. Third, they're blamed for all the productivity issues. And again, if you've been a CIO or worked with them in the past, they'll tell you that. Every issue is always an IT problem. And the fourth one, they can't prove compliance. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, they may spend all the time in the world to be very efficient at managing the process, even if it is automated. So whether manual or automated, maybe they've done it all right. But they now have to prove it, not only to themselves, but also to others. Their outside vendors, or regulators, I should say, their external auditors, the board, and others. They have to be able to prove that and do so in a cost-effective way. And lastly, the audit surprises. How many times have you walked into a customer, and if you haven't, I'm sure you will when you start asking questions around this, have you had any audit surprises? And typically you're going to find out that they did. There was many different examples out there. There are examples of customers who went years with security breaches with information freely flowing out of their systems before anyone ever caught it. So those audit surprises and those big, huge news announcements, those are big pain points for them. These are things that they're trying to avoid at all costs. And Access Governance Suite can help in each and every one of these to address their needs. Let's now take a look at another technical role within a customer that was going to be interested in access governance. And this, to be honest, is probably the point person that we're going to talk to off the bat, because they're going to be feeling the direct pains for the access governance side of the house most directly. These other individuals, such as the business executives, their pain is coming from a consequence maybe from what is happening with the chief security officer or with security in general. The CIO obviously is having these pains because his department is typically responsible for the enforcement of these. But the CISO or CSO, and again, it's interchangeable depending upon what company you're coming from or where they are in the world, this individual really has the responsibility to protect the company's information, the resources that they have, and ensure that the adherence to company policy, the security policies, is always enforced. Again, these are also individuals that are typically going to be one of the key roles for compliance and governance within an organization. Let's take a look at their measurements. And again, these are just sample ones, but these are definitely ones that they are going to have to look at or they're going to be evaluated on. Number one is the risk reduction, not risk elimination. Remember that there's really no way to completely eliminate risk, but we're trying to reduce it as much as possible. Second, they're going to be looking at the breaches. The organization is going to look at, if they have huge breaches, obviously the days of the CISO or CSO are going to be numbered. So they're going to be looking at those things. And lastly here, proactiveness, which goes to the first two. Being proactive is a key aspect of what a CISO or CSO is going to be all about. They're extremely paranoid almost about making sure that the system is secure. They also have a very hard job with it, though, as we go out. If you haven't had a chance, please go out and watch the CISO interview videos because you'll learn firsthand what it's like to be one. But when you think about their job, they have to take security issues very seriously while the rest of the company may not quite have that same care. And this is why integrating both IT and business together is so important, because it helps them both to see what the business is having to go through, as well as the business to understand what the real risk is from a security perspective. And so that marriage of the two that Access Governance Suite uniquely gives is very important to the sales process. So what are their pains specifically? Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big ones is going to be the fact that business typically doesn't understand security. Now, we're not talking about business as a whole. We're talking about individuals within the business. Individuals such as in sales, such as yourself maybe, security sometimes is a evil. Not even a necessary one. You just simply think of it as an evil thing. In reality, it's not. It's a necessary evil. But because the business doesn't understand the risk involved and the cost and potential risks there, they don't quite understand it. And so again, security is always being pointed out. Oh, if you just remove all those restrictions, then I could really get stuff done. Second, the rising internal threats. So threats are not just from the outside. Most of the threats are actually internal. And it may not be anybody trying to be nefarious. It may be people just goofing around. It may be individuals who are just trying to get access to some piece of information that they really shouldn't know. So those internal threats are there, as well as the external threats coming from the outside. Those individuals who are trying to hack into the systems for whatever reason. Fourth, the conflicting regulations. This is a huge one. Okay. If we take, for example, an organization that's on two different continents, such as a U.S. company and a company based in Europe, they're going to have two different sets of priorities, two different sets of regulations they're going to have to deal with. Take, for example, the U.S. Patriot Act and the EU Directive on Privacy. These two regulations don't quite jive with one another. Matter of fact, they're almost in direct opposition to each other. But yet, this CISO may be in an organization that he has to deal with that. So this is a big pain point and something that Access Governance Suite can definitely help them with. And lastly, the lack of resources. So while security is extremely important and compliance and governance are, and even the board may sign off on it, this person probably doesn't have an army of individuals sitting at his fingertips to go out there and to manage it. So again, he's going to be looking for things that will help him to reduce that pain or to eliminate it, such as automation and ways of educating the entire company as to the value of security. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch the Novell Access Governance Suite Proficiency Sales Training. This has been Justin Taylor, your host, wishing you happy selling.